Egyptologists wrote on these texts. There's a text in France called Abduction Extraordinaire. Never was translated into English, but it says that it talks about these people. He said these people that live in Europe with these mountains, that their way of communication is not a clear one because they're always grumbling. Because they were saying they even had to be taught how to talk, how to speak. Count Varney talked about that in Ruins of Empire. But in this Egyptian text, they said that these people are always grumbling. They have a reprehensible sex act, which means, you know, whatever got a hold, it don't matter. They can even fuck animals. These are the Egyptian texts. They're over in France and stuff. I was lucky to own one of these because a book came out called Set, the God of Confusion by T.H. Valdi. It's in most libraries. It's in most college libraries, but it was never published as far as a book for central publication. It's mostly in college libraries and stuff like that. You know, the colleges got books that they never publish to the public. They're only published for the colleges. And this book, Set, the God of Confusion, they actually have these texts from France in there, where they talk about these people, you know, and they say these people do not announce the day of battle. So you have to understand what they're trying to say. They say these people here are unfair. You see, if you have a disagreement, you're all going to come together and you're going to disagree, have the right to disagree. These people here will kill you without you even knowing that you had a problem with them, or they had a problem with you. So it goes into all, what these texts are trying to say in the Egyptian terms. And these texts may be about 3,000-4,000 years old. And what they were trying to say, they was looking at the Europeans and all, you know what I'm saying? And they were saying, you know, these people, you know, these people are not, they were trying to tell the people, because these were in religious texts, don't look at these people and say that they got the same type of mindset that you have as a human mindset. This is something new that's coming to the earth. So by the time the Romans came, that's why Hannibal and them fathers said, you're going to have to deal with these people. But Hannibal went in and he kicked their ass. They say in one day battle, he killed 70,000. You see. And he kicked their behind, and they said but this is what he did, to show you the mindset. Because the Europeans now looking at this said that he came all the way to the gates of Rome. And they said he turned around and went home. They wanted to know, they can't understand, these war generals studied him. And they wanted to know, they couldn't understand, why did you go in and take Rome? Like they would have done. If they come in for conquest, they're going to conquer it. You see what I'm saying? And they're going to be there for a couple of 100 years until they fall weak. So they're saying, why didn't you take Rome like they took the Indians or Native Americans over here? Or like they took South Africa? Why didn't you come in? You had them beat. But what they didn't understand, and to this day, these European generals can't understand why he did his battle, he proved his point, and then he went the fuck home. They couldn't understand why he didn't use Rome as a weapon, as a situation of conquest. It's because that's not his nature. That wasn't his nature to conquer Rome. What he was trying to do was kick them in the ass so he could fortify Carthage for a few more years. You see. And so, you see, so it's a lot of things. Which later on, so in so many words, Rome had to be so that we could have the experience of what atrocities would come, you see what I'm saying, with later European cultures. Which leads us to the Egyptian priests again, known again, because they did it twice. They say, we got to further this information to Greece and Rome. And then, during the time of Muhammad's invasion into Egypt, the Egyptian priest once again said, we have to take this information to Europe. Now why? They said after they closed the last temple, of Isis at Philae. For some reason, I don't know if it was spiritual, they said Europe went into a dark age. I think they went into a dark age because after Rome fell, you see what I'm saying? They never had this.
How did Rome fall?
Well, it deteriorated based on like anything else, from corruption. And Rome fell after its reputation was found out. Rome was weak for a couple of years, but they had killed so many people until they had a reputation. You don't mess with Rome. But remember, they said that the German Vandals, they were illiterate, so they didn't get the memo that these people wasn't nothing to fuck with. And they went up in there and kicked Rome ass. You see, so it deteriorated over the years based on corruption. And also they with Constantine, although they say didn't he kill his mother and his daughter or something like that? He turned it into a Christian country and stuff. You see what I'm saying? It was weakened for the simple fact that it meant that they couldn't, if they're going to do the army thing, they're going to have to do it in another fashion. They're going to have the Holy Roman Empire. But it's a Holy Roman Empire. So they got to hide behind the Pope when they do these conquests. But it's not going to be the same might of the Caesars. You see what I'm saying? They're just going to have to just rule in another way. In actuality, they never did fall. They just acquiesced Europe with the religion. So it became a religious domination. You see what I'm saying? A religious domination and stuff. The military fell, but they had a new way to rule. You see, the new way to rule is the same thing when we talked about the Queen of Prince Charles after he got his ass whipped over here, and they couldn't deal with guerrilla warfare. Where these rednecks was over here fighting. They said, no, you go over there, they're going to beat you 100 years. They said, just regroup, and we will take over financially. And then we'll put, because of the finances, we'll put the heads of the government will be connected to the queen. And we'll rule that way, rule through secrecy. So, same thing happened with the Egyptian priests after Egypt fell. They said, well, look, when and Muhammad was still living when the Arabs invaded Egypt. If there was a Muhammad, it could have just been a central priesthood. Because we know Bilal, come to find out, he was the one that wrote the Quran, because if there was a historical Muhammad, he couldn't read or write till the day he died. You see. He couldn't read or write till the day he died, and we knew it was some type of Egyptian, Ethiopian priesthood, just by the central surah of the star, where they mention Sirius in the Quran. You see, the moon, Tahuti, the cow, Hathor. You see, these different things that they did means that this was a part of a mystery system. You see, and in this particular case, it probably was an Ethiopian Cushite mystery system, because we know Arabia was a part of Cush. We know it had to be a Cushite mystery system based on the first 5 books of Moses. You see, it's not a Central Egyptian theme. It's just the third coming of Judeo-Christian. You see. But in that particular case, by that time of them, Ethiopia had usurped the whole Hebrew thing. In parts of Coptic Christianity. So we know who put this thing together. You see what I'm saying? It wasn't translated from Gabriel, but then again, Gabriel could have been a priesthood. But in so many words, after they came and dominated and took over Egypt, the Egyptian priest said, look, Islam is a new conquest tool. You see, to essentially bring Islam into play, they had to fight at Mecca and Medina. And it was a kick-ass machine. So they say this is the same kick-ass machine that conquered Egypt. So what we can do, these Egyptian priests, is we can go under the banner of Islam, take all these sacred texts, and go into Europe, and Islam will be a conquest thing, but the religion would be a mystery system. You see, so all these ancient Egyptian texts and all this ancient stuff that was translated, so here go again, here's another translation point. They took meta, they took Greek, they took Coptic, they took Latin. Remember now, the Egyptian priests had already translated stuff into Latin and translated stuff into Greece. Coptic is later day Egyptian. You got Hebrew. But these Egyptian priests are the authors of all these languages and all these texts. So what they did is they went to Turkey, Baghdad, Salamanca, Spain, and then they translated the Greek, the Latin, the Coptic, the Meta into Arabic. And then they used it as a central force to open up the 16 universities in Europe to teach the European. They stayed there close to 800 years. Then whatever they brought to Europe, the European preserved. They had these conferences. They had a conference at Toledo. You get Toledo, Ohio, comes from Toledo, Spain. And from those conferences of Toledo, now this is after either right before the expulsion of the Moors in 1492 or right after. They had these conferences of all these texts that the Moors had brought up from Egypt and brought up from around the central ancient world and gave to the Europeans for 800 years, close to 800 years. So they took these texts and they had these periods. They call them Renaissance periods. Now, so what they did is they had these conferences and they had these festivals or conferences or these Renaissance periods in a place called Toledo. And from Toledo, with all those texts and stuff from Toledo, Spain, Cambridge, Oxford, and those early universities around Europe opened from the stuff that they preserved from the Moors. Then, after 1492, and a little bit, a couple of years later, they start having the Renaissance period in Italy. Now remember that this is very key, because you'll hear these white people talk about the Renaissance periods. And they'll talk about things like all this learning and all this stuff. Cut off again?
No, I'm checking the tapes.
Okay. Whenever you hear the Renaissance period, let me know when you're on.
Yeah, I'm on.
Whenever you hear the Renaissance period in Italy, that was nothing but them acquiescing the Moorish doctrines. You see,
talk about that for a while.
They talk about these Renaissance periods, and they talk about all this great learning and stuff that happened with the Renaissance stuff, from music to art to philosophical points of view that would be the mindset of the European coming from out of the Middle Ages. They talk about the Renaissance period. And all the Renaissance period is the Pope and the Italians taking advantage of the learning that was given to the Europeans for the last 800 years by the Moors. So in so many words, here's another period where they basically take all these ancient doctrines of the Moors